today, talking about protein. Super excited. Protein it can be either a sore subject for a lot of people, or it can be like, I love protein. Depends on who the person is, what your, we'll say, dietary preferences are, what your palate is like, all of those different things. But we know that a lot of people tend to struggle with protein intake. And so we wanted to make sure that we address it and kind of just cover, the purpose of protein, how much you should be getting, and some of our favorite protein sources and tips on how to consume more protein.
There you go. Kind of cover the basics of protein.
Yes.
Big building blocks. So let me share my screen with you guys so that you can see this.
So we have a little presentation. Bear with. All right. Boom. All right. So the importance of protein. Why is it that we need to consume? So what is the purpose of protein? Well, first off, it is definitely one of the most important macronutrients out there. Macronutrients being protein, carbs, and fats. So the big nutrients that your body needs. It holds 4 calories per gram, helps with muscle building, sustainability, and growth, helps with appetite and satiety. So if you aren't getting enough protein, usually your cravings are going to be going through the roof. You're going to be hungry. You may not be sustaining any muscle. Helps with body repair. So if you are getting great workouts in and looking to build muscle, you also have to repair that muscle that you are building so that you are stronger and getting bigger with muscle. Helps with immune health and antibodies, helps with insulin spikes and drops, also creates biochemical reactions that will help with digestion and digestion issues, energy production, blood clotting, muscle contractions, balances fluids in the body, transport and storage issues, so much stuff. It's important. Protein's important. Did I drive that into you?
Yeah.
Bottom line, protein is king, and the majority of people don't consume enough at all. So honestly, the question becomes, how much should you be consuming? When we're talking like general rule of thumb,
for easiest
math is 1 gram per pound of body weight. And so if you're using the Fit4D nutrition calculator, we have it automatically programmed in there for that. The minimum is going to be about 0.8 grams per pound of body weight for muscle maintenance and up to 1.2 grams per pound. But the goal is to fuel the lean muscle. So if you are, we'll say, like a heftier person who doesn't have a lot of lean muscle, if you end up like calculating your protein goal and it's, let's say, like 200 grams a day, and you're maybe getting 60 right now, you can shoot for a lower amount. So you can calculate based on like 0.6 grams per day, because the goal is to fuel that lean muscle without like blowing your head off with the amount of protein that you're consuming.
and that's a lot of people get kind of stuck there, and that's why there's potentially so many like calorie calculators of this or diets for that or all that fun stuff. And a lot of times we think, well, how much do you weigh? Then you should be eating this much amount of food. And there's so many like myths out there about like, oh, you're under eating. It's like maybe you're under eating certain things, but like if you have excess weight to lose, you're not in a deficit. And so that's why fueling lean mass is important. So like, and that's what you would be feeding, not necessarily just overall total mass.
Yes. So the consumption, as you're realizing, will vary based on your dietary preferences, your muscle size, your actual goals. Are you looking to build muscle, maintain muscle? All of it's going to vary, and it's going to be on an individualized basis, which is where the tracking comes into play. How to eat more protein? That is the ultimate question for the majority of the population. And so first, like if you're not getting enough protein, you probably have to take a look at what you're using to obtain it. And you might have to change some things. So often people just are like, oh, well, these are my staple things. How am I even supposed to eat more protein? Well, you might have to change your staple things in order to, get some different results. So how to eat more protein? First, if you take a look at what you're currently eating, it'll give you a baseline for how much protein you're actually consuming. So if you were to look back at the reference that I gave with, if you're eating 60 to 70 grams a day, you're like, okay, I get this amount of protein when I consume this amount. And then the question can become like, well, can I just consume more of those protein sources that I enjoy?
Like if you have eggs for breakfast, all right, maybe a little bit more like eggs or egg whites or whatever the protein source is. At each meal, can you increase that? If you do, you may have to change the rest of the plate. But then looking at it, it's like, all right, cool. What are the things that I can and should adjust to be able to hit my targets?
Yeah. And then if you find single ingredient sources like that you enjoy eating, it's definitely going to help. The majority of the population are probably going to need, like, if you're getting most of your protein from single ingredient sources, when I say that, I mean like chicken, beef, fish. Those are mainly composed of protein. Of course, there's going to be some fats in there. But in general, most people will probably need to consume around 5 to 8 ounces of leaner meats 3 times a day to at least hit above 100 grams of protein per day.
And I was saying that's where obviously like some people, are hit or miss about how much meat they want to eat or whatever. And sometimes it may not be practical in life to be able to sit down and eat 8 ounces of meat at every meal. And that's where supplementation comes into play. So if you do need like protein powders, things like that, it can help bridge the gap.
Yeah. And this is something where like having that baseline knowledge for where you're at and then slowly increasing it is going to help with digestion. It's going to help with I can't even say it, satiation.
There we go.
Because what you'll find is as you consume more protein, it's very filling and it's going to fill you up a lot quicker than most things. So ratios, like he was saying earlier, are probably going to have to change. So if you're used to consuming like a big bowl of salad, that's going to fill your stomach up. But the amount of protein that you're going to have to need is also going to fill your stomach up. So you might have to play with balances like that to make sure that you're not like, oh my God, I feel like I'm going to explode from food within me. Incorporating dairy. So if you don't have any intolerances to dairy, fat-free or low-fat cottage cheese and Greek yogurts are great options to either add into protein shakes, to add recently, we've been doing like tuna and cottage cheese. It's actually really, really good. So canned tuna and cottage cheese.
Or any shredded meat with cottage cheese or yogurt or whatever. You can flavor it however you want. Or if you want, like you could obviously just eat it plain, right? The cool thing about that is it makes for a really solid protein source. It doesn't take a lot of preparation. So if you don't have a bunch of time to cook, it's a good option.
And then front loading your protein at the beginning of the day. So if you're a person who is typically on the go, definitely highly recommend front loading a majority of your protein at the beginning of the day. It's going to help keep you fuller for longer, and you're more than likely to hit that protein target in general.
And also, if you're not eating a bunch of meals, sometimes like, if people are fasting or only having 1 or 2 meals a day, sometimes if that's the case, then being intentional about the first thing you eat being protein, because it'll be really hard to hit what your body needs in a single meal unless it's like all protein. And same thing, it would be hard to actually like consume it without being uncomfortable. And so even if you're typically go with like 1 meal, maybe splitting it into 2, whereas one's basically just protein focused, that's all it is. And then second meal can be a little bit more free, hit the rest of your calories, obviously still prioritize protein to kind of bridge the gaps. But sometimes breaking it up like that could be helpful, but obviously looking at how many meals you eat throughout the day and then dividing it in a way that's doable.
Yep. And then this is a random side note, like with that, when you are eating protein is really going to help change your physique. And so let's say if you're a person who's been hitting a certain amount of calories and maybe we'll say weight loss has halted or stalled or if nothing's happening, if you change the way that your macros are distributed. So if you're a person who tends to eat less protein, maybe it's you're eating less than 1 gram per kilogram or 1 gram per pound per day, and you increase that to 1 gram per pound or even 1.1, then you can see massive changes with your satiation, massive changes in your physique, also with incorporating weight training as well.
And that's where actually like, kind of a cool fun hack if you want to get crazy. I'm sure there's, all kinds of shit out there people, hear of and do. And one of the things that's, been successful for a lot of people, but also catches a lot of, slack or grief or whatever you want to call it, is like being on a very low calorie or restricted diet. And like those can be detrimental to lean mass, which is beneficial for long-term health. And the way to counteract that is if you are, the deeper of a deficit you're in, the more importance protein is going to play. So that way, like the muscle that you do have will be saved, will be built, all of that fun stuff. So the weight that you are losing is the majority fat, right? That's where a lot of people, where they've gone through crazy dieting cycles, super restrictive on calories, didn't necessarily prioritize protein. So a lot of the weight that they lost was lean mass. So it makes it harder and harder to lose weight or maintain weight moving forward. And so this kind of helps solve that, where it's like being in a deficit isn't necessarily a bad thing. That's not going to be horrible, but you do have to make sure that if you are in a deficit, you're prioritizing things that you do eat so that you're holding on to health or lean mass.
Yes. Planning ahead, just like with anything in life, creating some staple meals that will hit a certain amount of protein in each meal is going to help. Then, as I mentioned earlier, mixing dairy products with different single ingredient protein sources, tuna and cottage cheese. Even if you do like egg whites and egg and take a little bit of Greek yogurt, it'll amp up the protein a little bit as well, give it a creamy texture. Protein powder and egg white, so many different things that you can find. You just have to find the one that you enjoy and consume regularly.
And planning ahead doesn't necessarily always mean like pre-cooking or meal prepping. Sometimes it's just like a matter of laying out go-to things. Like, oh, when I'm on the go, when I'm pressed for time, if I work late, like what are the things that I can grab? Because realistically, for a lot of people, that's where they end up shooting themselves in the face. It's like, oh, it's a long day of work. They didn't have prepared food and they don't necessarily have a go-to item for when that situation occurs. So then they end up just, like pizza and beer or whatever is convenient or enjoyable. And so laying out some of those, go-tos or fallbacks when you are pressed for time or you're on the go, you want to swing by somewhere and pick something up, you know exactly what to do and kind of save yourself from yourself before you get there.
Yes. More protein helps with those cravings. Supplementation, as we had mentioned earlier, protein powder, even collagen powder that you can throw either in your coffees, make it as a shake. You can bake with these things. Protein bars, there's so many options. That is one of the, we'll say, benefits and perks of living in America, all the things that we have access to.
But it is also like, as much as there is like an abundance of things to choose from, sometimes you do have to just be a little bit more thoughtful, because I would say traditional go-to snacks for most people, especially in America, are going to be carbon fat forward, right? So like that's why looking at things that have a substantial amount of protein for if you did want to have something on the go or as a snack would be more beneficial than like, chips are Danish or like whatever. Because even like, on the go breakfast for most people is like a bagel, which doesn't necessarily have any protein, right? And so taking a look at those things and saying, like, all right, cool, what are the things that I can have if I want a snack or something quick that also prioritizes this macronutrient?
And so if you're looking at, protein powders or collagen powders, choosing ones that have between like 20 to 30 grams in each scoop is going to help with calories in them, and then make sure that you're getting at least that minimum threshold that you need. All right, things to know. In general, tracking is what's going to give you a baseline for how much protein you're currently consuming, as well as give you just knowledge about what the heck is in your food so that you know what's high in protein, what's low in fat, high in fat, and so on and so forth, so that you can choose according to your palate and the amount of protein that you need. Calculate protein intake based on your goal. You have no idea what you're supposed to hit if you have no idea what you're supposed to hit, right? So make sure that you calculate that, at least the minimum amount of protein that you should be intaking, and then shoot to aim above that. Increased protein consumption can lead to massive increased health benefits, as you saw with the importance of protein in general. Drink more water. One thing to note is that as protein intake increases, once again, this is going to vary. Some people, depending on how drastically they increase their protein, can get constipated. That is normal. To prevent that, drink more water and walk.
But then also with that, just take note, if you are in a deficit, like you may shit less because you have less shit. So like, it's not a bad thing. There's a difference between being constipated and then not creating waste because you're not eating a bunch of food. So like, if you do have to go to the bathroom and it's hard, you're constipated. If you just don't have to go because you haven't eaten enough food, that will change.
Yes, things to note. Protein source tips. Basically, find 2 to 3 single ingredient protein sources that you enjoy and that you'll include on your intake. Some of our favorite and go-to ones, chicken breasts and thighs. Thighs, they get a bad rap, but they are so juicy and they really don't carry that much fat in them. Egg whites, canned tuna is great, shrimp is great. Recently, we got some wild caught smoked salmon, which is super awesome. Scallops, top sirloin, the cottage cheese and Greek yogurts, protein powders, collagen powders, and I'm actually smoking some beef cheeks right now. It's pretty phenomenal.
There you go.
It was disgusting to cut, but it tastes delicious. I will tell you that. And it's very low in fat and high in nutrients. Focus on eating lean protein if you're going to try and keep those calories low. And then once again, to figure out what's in your protein sources, utilize that nutrition tracker. And in conclusion, you gotta know how much protein you need to consume in order to really create a plan and plan ahead on how much you should be eating per meal and per day to make sure that you are hitting those goals. Figure out 2 to 3 single ingredient sources that you're going to use to hit your protein. And then once again, plan ahead. But those were most of the, I would say, key tips with regards to protein. If you guys have any questions, be sure to submit them. We are here to help. I didn't see any burning questions or anything this week, but everybody's intakes and check-in forms look phenomenal. Super proud of you all with the insights that you're having with regards to your health and nutrition and just the phenomenal progress that all of you are making. But we love you. Thanks for joining us. And if you have any questions, be sure to submit them. We'll see you next time.